And someone who did a documentary on the moon and the nature of artifacts on the moon talked to a NASA insider who said we lied about everything. And I think we have to keep that in mind when they are producing these probes and these missions. What they actually tell us they're about and what they tell us they've found is not going to be the truth unless the truth will not affect our perception of reality. I've written extensively about the moon. I don't believe, and even more so as I understand more, I don't believe that the moon is a natural body, or at least at the very least it's a construct from a body that maybe is natural but has been, if you like, converted. And one of the things we talked about during the show was this idea of suppression of people's perception of the possible. And we are going to have to wide open our minds, crash open our minds so wide if we're going to start to understand the nature of the human plight. For instance, the idea that something that is 2,160 miles in diameter, the moon, could be a construct is beyond the comprehension, the sense of possibility of most people, because it's just, we can't build that. Yeah, no, we can't build that, but that does not mean that it cannot be built if you understand the nature of reality. And, one of the things that I've been focusing on in the last few years, and I'm a big time at this moment, is the nature of Saturn and what Saturn is. It's very clear that at one point Saturn did not have rings, but was actually, I say Saturn is a dwarf sun, a dwarf star. I said Jupiter's the same. The Saturn gives off 2.5 times more energy than it receives from the sun. It is a form of star, not a planet as we perceive it. And the rings are artificial, I suggest. There's a man called Norman Bergrun who has a long history in aeronautics and space research and science and that whole arena. He's in his 90s now, but he wrote a book some years ago, back in the 80s, I think it was, called The Ring Makers of Saturn, because he observed from the pictures sent back by the Voyager missions, Voyager 1 and 2 to Saturn, also to Jupiter, but to Saturn then, that there were gigantic electromagnetic phenomena in the rings of Saturn that were actually creating them. This all fits with what I say Saturn is, which is a gigantic broadcasting system, which is broadcasting this fake reality in league with the moon, which is like something that picks that up and amplifies it at the Earth, so we get it big time strong. And this is the way that at least part of this matrix is formed.
Haven't you written in the past, though, that, and let me go back to Mars for a second, David, and all this stuff is in your books, and it's very intriguing, very interesting about the moon and certainly Saturn, and again, it's like the reptilian thing. We see the demagoguery of it. We see it used everywhere, and they worship it, so we should be suspicious. Talk about suspicious minds. You had written in a few of your books talking about Mars having been the original colony, that Mars was destroyed or burned out, and then the people had moved here, and then in fact a lot of the Aryan race, Aryan worship comes from something like Mars. Are you still in that mind?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I was going to go on, but you've taken me there, which is great, about Mars, because there's an excellent book written quite a long time ago now by a man called David Tolbert, who seems to be an excellent researcher, and he's involved in this whole area of the electric universe, which is fundamentally important to understanding how the universe works. And he wrote a book years ago called The Saturn Myth. And the Saturn myth was the result of what seems like decades of research into ancient legends, accounts, symbols relating to Saturn. And it's fascinating. I mean, you mentioned about things being all around us, so we should look at them. Well, Saturn is all around us in the most extraordinary way in terms of symbols. There's Saturn symbolism everywhere. Courts are Saturn symbols. The black gowns of judges and when you get your degree in education, that is Saturn. The cube is Saturn. This is why they have the black cube in Mecca, which is the focus of worship of the Islamic religion. It's everywhere, and I go into it in the books. And I'm really going to go into this at Wembley in big time as well. And I'm going further on all the time as I understand more. And it's one of the big pennies that dropped with me that brought this kaleidoscope into much greater focus, Jack, was when I realized that actually Saturn was once the prime sun of the Earth. It was in a very different position to the one where it is now, and it didn't have rings. And there was this phenomenal cataclysm, which people like Emmanuel Velikovsky wrote about in the 50s to great ridicule, of course, but people like David Tolbert and the Electric Universe fraternity now that have got this whole area of science which is very, very credible. They are supporting this whole basic theme, not every detail, but the theme of Velikovsky's work, which was that there was this fantastic cataclysm which links to the Great Flood and all the ancient accounts of the earth tipping over and mountains soaring out of the earth and all this stuff in the ancient past. And the way that the solar system was rearranged. And Tolbert's reading of this from the ancient accounts is that there was a catastrophic interaction during this cataclysmic event between the Earth and Mars, and enormous electromagnetic bolts were exchanged between the two. And Mars, which was nothing like, well, I say it is now, it's nothing like we're told it is now, before this cataclysmic event or events, it seems to be more than one, which for me, Mars was not the desolate planet that we're told it is now. That long ago. People talk about, science talks about, millions and millions of years ago, this happened. No, much, much, much closer than that. Because, you can bash something over a period of time, or you can set it on fire and destroy it in a minute. And something massively cataclysmic hit or affected Mars, which changed its nature very, very quickly. And the solar system we see today is nothing like the solar system that the ancients describe. And Mars is, what do they call it? What do they call Mars? They call the planet of war. And one expression of this is that there was this symbolic war in the heavens that the ancients talked about. And Saturn ceased to be the sun, because it was a two-sun system then. We had the sun that we know now, and we had the sun that we call Saturn, that was much closer to the Earth than our sun, and thus was the prime sun from Earth's perspective. And then it went walkabout. Venus went walkabout. So did Mars. So did Jupiter in this great cataclysmic event. And interestingly, the observations of Norman Bergrun, looking at the images that came back from the Voyager missions to Saturn, and which have been supported by the later Cassini mission to Saturn in its images, is that there are these enormous electromagnetic phenomena, he calls them vehicles, which are spewing out, he calls it exhaust, I say it's something very different, that are actually creating the rings. And the official story is that the rings of Saturn are full of ice, basically, ice particles of various sizes. I say that is actually some form of crystal, maybe that we don't know about on Earth and have never come across. But those rings are a receiver transmission system.
It looks like a giant antenna. Hello?
Yes, Exactly, and you know, one of the things that the Cassini mission found is that there are enormously powerful radio emissions. Hello, coming from Saturn, and there is at one pole of Saturn a continuous hexagram storm twirling. At the other pole, there is a storm that looks just like an eye, a continuous storm, and they found that this hexagon storm, did I say hexagon? Hexagon storm is moving in relation to the radio signal emissions. And you can go on the internet and put in sounds from Saturn in a search engine, and you can hear some of these really horrible sounds that are being recorded coming out of Saturn. And what I'm saying here is that sound represents the information matrix that the human genetic manipulation recorded by all these ancient cultures has been tuned in to pick up and decode into reality, and what reality we would be, how our reality would be different if we weren't decoding that, what I call the hack, into our reality, into our sense of reality. I don't know, but I think it is substantial, and that if that was not broadcasting and we weren't receiving and transmitting in it through manipulated DNA, then I think the world that we would be experiencing through the conscious mind would be very different to the one we are now.
You know,
exactly in line with the Matrix movies.
Let's really freak people out, because one of the top experts in planetary life was asked about why go to Mars. And he said, I wouldn't even waste my time going to Mars. He said, I would go to Euclideus, Saturn's moon, or Titan. He mentioned Euclideus, and he said that is the closest possibility of Earth atmosphere holding life. It's like a little Earth, allegedly. So here we have not only Titan, but possibly Euclideus that could have life.
Yes, I think very different life to us, because, you know, what I'm going into now is that, you know, behind this reptilian element and behind possibly all this so-called extraterrestrial interaction, I prefer to call them interdimensionals, is a force which doesn't take form. It is like an electromagnetic form which can take any form, and it works through these other groups. And what I found fascinating was to read in some detail in the last few months the content of a find in Egypt in 1945 of a sealed jar of writings from a group that had become known as the Gnostics. The Gnostics were the people behind the great library of Alexandria, which was sacked and burned and destroyed by the Roman Church. They were basically the mentality behind the Cathars in southern France that were destroyed by the authorities and the Roman Church. Their last stand was at a castle called Montségur in, I think it was 1244, something like that. And what you see as a common theme is these Gnostic thinkers, these that have this Gnostic view of the reality in the universe, end up being slaughtered, and their information, if not being destroyed, then being taken out of public circulation. I think you'll find a lot of it in the vaults of the Vatican, personally. And it's interesting what these Gnostic writings talk about. About a fifth of the writings in these sealed container discovered in Egypt, which seems to go back to around 400 AD, which was in the period when the Great Library of Alexandria in Egypt was destroyed. About a fifth of the writings refer to a group of entities that they call the archons. And they talk about something called the demiurge, which is their version of what Christians would call the devil or Satan. And the archons were basically what Christians would call the demons, what Islamic Muslim people would call the jinn, and what others would call fallen angels, all this stuff. And it talks about how this physical world is the realm of the archons and the demiurge. It talks about the fact that they do not have what has been decoded or translated as intentionality, which I would describe, I think, more simply as creative imagination. They don't have it. And they therefore have to parasite off those who have and tap into their creative imagination and get them to create for them. Are we describing what we've been talking about in the show today?
Yeah.
And how that they cannot, if they had a blank sheet of paper, they could not create anything upon it. But give them a sheet of paper full of something and they could twist it, manipulate it, and edit it and censor it, but they could not actually start it from scratch because they don't have that creative imagination. And it talks about how the fact that they parasite off humanity by accessing the human mind. And on it goes. I'll go into this more at Wembley, but what I was reading was what I've uncovered in my own way and in my own language all the way through these years. I mean, it just dovetailed so perfectly. And I do feel that they are describing something that's absolutely based on fact. And when you look at it, Jack, look at our society. At every level, it is levels and different groups parasiting off other people and other groups, all the way down. Look, I mean, what greater expression of the parasital mind could you have than the human banking system? It mirrors the parasital nature of these archon entities. Everything. I mean, what is it doing? And in fact, what banking is doing, because everything is energy, it is trawling and vampiring our energy. What is money? It's energy. You put it in your pocket, you put it in your bank account, that energy becomes attached to you while it's in your ownership and therefore in your energy field. It picks up your energy. It then moves on to someone else. It picks up their energy. And when it eventually comes back to source, those who've put the money out there, all these networks around the Rothschilds, then they are trawling not only energy back plus interest. What is the interest, Jack? You know, in the holographic world, it's more money on top of principal. But the interest at the energetic level is human energy on top of the energy of money that was put out there in the first place.
But that is your life source. People forget this. This is why we say it's so important if you want change in the world to use that life force, if it's converted to money or whatever buying power, consumer power you have, and vote with that. Forget the voting at the electronic voting booth. Put your energy into things that are ethical, that you support, that expand consciousness and freedom throughout the universe, and you'll see a different situation, David. That is the answer. That can happen. That's our life force. Is we go to work every day. We work, or we toil the land and create food, and that creates a commodity that can then be traded or sold. But if we're giving all our money, whether it's wittingly or unwittingly, to Goldman Sachs, or to J.P. Morgan, or to Chase Manhattan, or Citibank, or whatever Rothschild front company it is, we're going to keep getting the same thing over and over. Are you ready to answer some questions?
Yeah, these people are parasites, and if I can find it, I just want to give you a quick quote on this situation that we're currently discussing. Let me find it because it's important to give a feel on the fact that they know that what I've just said about money is true. There was a document, I'm sure you've heard of it, no doubt, that came to light years ago called Quiet Weapons for Quiet Wars, and it described in some detail how we mass social engineering and mass mind control goes on. And one of the things it talked about at some length was how money is used in to this end. And this is what it said about money in the context of what we've just talked about. Economics is only a social extension of a natural energy system. Since energy is the key to all activity on the face of the earth, it follows that in order to attain a monopoly of energy, raw materials, goods and services, everything you've just mentioned, and to establish a world system of slave labor, it is necessary to have a first strike capability in the field of economics. In order to maintain our position, it is necessary that we have absolute first knowledge of the science of control over all economic factors and the first experience of at engineering the world economy. In order to achieve such sovereignty, you must at least achieve this one end, that the public will not make either the logical or mathematical connection between economics and the other energy sciences, or learn to imply such knowledge. To make a short story of it all, it was discovered that an economy obeyed the same laws as electricity, and that all of the mathematical theory and practical and computer knowledge developed for the electronic field could be directly applied to the study of economics. This discovery was not openly declared, you surprise me, and its more subtle implications were and are kept a closely guarded secret. For example, that in an economic model, wait for this, my goodness me, for example, that in an economic model, human life is measured in dollars, and that the electric spark generated when opening a switch connected to an active inductor is mathematically analogous to the initiation of war. It's all happening, Jack, in the electromagnetic field.
And this is why they need me to wear my seatbelt, because they don't see me as a human life. They see me of units of energy translated into fractional and reserve lending. I'm not a person anymore, David. I'm a credit rating. I found this out looking for a flat the last 3 or 4 months, and realized that my financials weren't in good order because I live in the underground economy, and it's really changed just in the last 2 years. I'm on a no rent list. I find I'm on a no food list. I'm on a no this list, a no that list, and they want to figure out exactly what I'm worth as a human to see if I can even get on a plane and fly at an airport. So we've really lost our way, and people like David, I think, really a big cold bucket of ice water sometimes. I want to get to some questions because I don't want to keep it too much longer, and there's 10 questions, so the quicker you answer them, the quicker I get you out of here, and I want to make sure everybody got input. All right, David?
Okay.
David Icke with us, davidicke.com, our good friend. I recently watched, this is, by the way, from Jim. I recently watched David's video at Oxford Union. At the end, he explained how he likens reality to a radio frequency. He spoke about that earlier. He told a story of a hypnotist that made a man unable to see his daughter standing right in front of him. His question is that if this is true, are we all on the same frequency? Because how do we all see the same reality, i.e. people and events? And if you raise your consciousness, do you still see this reality as well as an extension of it?
Well, this collective reality is a collective information field. So we will look out of the window and we'll see the same car passing in the street. But what we think about it and what we make of it and how we react to it and respond to it will be different. That's where we put our unique spin on things. So we're in this reality. We are, in terms of the conscious mind, tuned in to this frequency. Thus, we all pick up the same collective reality. But that's only the starting point, because, in the same way that I described how this guy was hypnotized so he couldn't see his daughter standing in front of him, his daughter in her prime state is an energetic field. She's not the hologram that we see. That is created when the five senses take energetic information, the prime state of this reality, and turn it into electrical information, which is communicated to the brain, which then decodes that information into a holographic digital reality. If you don't go through that process of decoding that energetic field through into the holographic, through the brain, you will not in your conscious world see that energy field. So all the hypnotist did was to implant a blocking frequency, a blocking code, through the hypnotic nature of the way he worked the guy, to stop that man's brain decoding the energy field of his daughter, which is outside of the realm of the conscious mind. Thus, she was not decoded through into the holographic realm of the conscious mind. Thus, everyone in the room who was doing that could see her. He could not see her, even though she was in front of him. Why? Because she wasn't decoded through by him into the realm of the conscious mind. Now, this opens up a great Pandora's box of how you can individually and collectively do what that hypnotist did, through various and infinite numbers of increasing numbers of techniques, to stop people individually and collectively decoding reality at the energetic level and bringing it through into the holographic level. So what is going on in the electromagnetic field, in the energetic level of this reality, which if we weren't manipulated, we would be experiencing through the conscious mind, that currently we're not. You see, once you've got this situation where if they can block the decoding mechanism, you can keep something out of human reality, five sense reality, then, you know, where's the limit? The sky's the limit. And this is happening all the time. And a lot of this manipulation through symbolism is doing that. It's putting blocking frequencies in, so we're not pulling everything into holographic reality that we could be experiencing. And when you start to expand your mind, you might not initially be able to see things that you couldn't before visually, but you can. I mean, how many people have been through this? You can then start to see things in terms of your perception of seeing the world in a completely different way. Oh, I couldn't see that was going on before, but now it's pretty obvious to me. Why? Because you have expanded the realm of, or the range that you are perceiving the world in, and thus you're now starting to look into the world from outside of this matrix and see things within it you couldn't see before.
Yeah, so
we all ETs, trapped in an existence, perception blocked by Saturn's radio emissions. We all think it's the end, but really maybe it's a consciousness shift into a new recognition. And come again, like a new wave, bringing in new fishes from older days. And the time comes, so you better start readying, cause motherfuckers almost Armageddon. And they're using the moon to bounce sine waves back and forth from Saturn, it's true. Look at the planet, or maybe a dwarf star, looks like it's got an antenna, goes far. Distant alien organisms communicating with Earth, creating a schism. World I know has gone away. The world I love has gone away. All inside, fading away. Come again. Mark of the beast, dollar bill thrills. Look at the triangle, it's a pyramid still. If we could see the ocean bed floors, we know what was in store, and we run 4-7 score. Like Atlantis, the ocean floor is buried, and all the knowledge and lies seem to be carefully carried. And the time comes, so you better start readying, cause motherfuckers almost Armageddon. And they're using the moon to bounce sine waves back and forth from Saturn, it's true. Distant alien organisms communicating with Earth, creating a schism. Mental aviation created by ties and negligence and lies and separation.